All right, Danielle. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Welcome everyone to the TDG meeting today, 22nd of February. The agenda we're going to go through today, we're going to go through our usual business, touch on AU Core immunization change proposals, and then the AU Core vitals consensus, so vitals and measurements. Ruben will talk through gender harmony, and then some updates about our upcoming meetings. All right, so usual business. The meetings, minutes of the last meeting were sent out. Do I have anyone motion to approve those meetings, meeting minutes?
Happy to motion that those minutes are approved. Do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you.
Danielle, if you can publish that first poll, please.
I would like to. There it is. Sorry, I'm on the web thing. It's a little bit different. Here it is. Let's launch.
Thank you. And then when
still only got 70% of people voted yet. Please pop your votes in, including if you need to abstain. Not a problem. All right, I think that's those people who asked that question now. So I'll just pop that result up and share that.
All right, thank you very much. The minutes are approved. And then a review of actions from the previous meeting. The previous meeting, there was 3 actions. The first was for Danielle and Kylan to organize a specific joint session on the relationships of CDG, TDG, as well as AU-CDI and AU Core. Danielle, do you have an update on that action?
I can say that we're talking about internally, and one of the reasons we're still talking about that internally is because we'd also like to include the relationship with the AU e-requesting data for interoperability and AU e-requesting IG in that, and ensure that what we put forward is pretty clear across those 4 aspects. So we haven't scheduled a time yet, but I'm hoping that will be pretty soon, and I'm still in discussions. So I'll try and give an update at the next consensus meeting, which is 7th of March, and see if we're ready at that time to provide a little bit of an overview on that, and also do a Q&A.
Okay. Thank you for the update, Danielle, and we will look forward to a update on the 7th of March. There was an action for Ruben to address Heath's comments about multiple names in name to use. Ruben is not on the call right now, so we will hold that over till next time. And then there was an action for Tim Panaho to determine to continue progressing immunization change requests, which we will touch on those change proposals later in this presentation. All right, some updates and reminders. The March Connectathon and plenary session, the Eventbrite is live. The links are at the end of the presentation and will be on various communications and the Confluence page. So please keep an eye out for any updates on that and get signed up. Additionally, AU-CDI has released the R1 draft for comment. The feedback for the community is due 8th of March. Again, there's more slides and information at the end of the presentation to look at when these slides are posted, as well as links to the AU-CDI release 1, and then an update to the AU Core IG, including a reference to that draft to comment to provide feedback. So I encourage you all to take a look at their initial draft and add your feedback to it. So changes have been applied to the IG over the since the previous consensus meeting, so be sure to take a look at that. And then I'm going to hand it over to Brett to talk about a quick recap of the core condition pre-consensus meeting from previous Friday, where the removal of must support on body site was approved, and Brett added narrative updates and guidance for that. So Brett, if you would give a quick update on that, please.
Sure. If you can go into that ticket, that would be good. So base.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've just added a comment there with a linkage to a draft branch. So the build, the build.FHIR, yep. So that's so this was rounding up the changes discussed. So you'll notice in the actual model body site is no longer must support.
Can we just make
However,
that a little bit bigger?
constraints.
Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, and constraints are still attached to those with extensible binding to value set there. And up above that is some supporting narrative. So in the usage section, there's an entry added for the third one down in the profile specific implementation guidance. So that was added as some words to support that. So it was trying to just put a brief statement about the use of condition code text in terms of anything really you want to say, but body site is mentioned particularly.
Excellent. Thank you, Brett. A link to that JIRA ticket is here if, as you guys review, any comments, etc., please put it in the FHIR 44712 JIRA ticket. So be sure to check that out. And any questions, feel free to post to Zulip.
And just, I guess, on that one, so that 44712 was voted on and approved to go in, and it was just confirming that the guidance note in this meeting was okay, and if there was any particular concerns about that text. I think, Richard, you were interested to see that prior to it being merged into master. Were you happy with what was shown, or did you want to see that again?
Look, I'm happy. Find my mic. I'm happy with what's there.
Okay, excellent. We'll merge that in, and if there are any concerns with that change, then people can continue to raise any of the issues. Oh, there's a hand up. Heath.
I put a comment in the JIRA, but I thought some of the content that was in the Confluence page was really useful to actually provide some examples. I know we don't want to overload the text too much, but it might just help give some clarity around what that actual statement means. And having watched the video from last week, there was actually 3 examples that was presented as well. And I thought that the example where it was including a body site and the laterality that have come from separate fields was probably, I don't know, that one's a tricky one for me. I'm thinking if there is a field for body site, you should actually be putting that field into the body site, not just in the text. But and I'm not sure if that was kind of along the lines of where Richard was going in his comments in that meeting. But yeah, that's a couple of comments on that card.
Okay. Thank you, Heath. If you can add those comments to the JIRA, and then Brett can take a look and update any of the text as appropriate.
Well, can I suggest, because I think the JIRA is, the JIRA is addressed. I think what we're talking about is providing some better guidance on that. And so the existing AU core guidance page has some sections for where we've decided that we need better guidance on things, including with like fragmented examples, which probably looks a bit similar to what you were talking about, Heath. And if this is a thing we want to call out, that it's actually worth providing and linking off to a guidance page. So we don't overload the IG with examples, but we can say, if this is a thing you need to do, here's some actual fragments and more detailed things about it. That sounds like an enhancement to me to put that on a section on guidance in the AU Core IG. Does that make sense to you, Brett, Heath?
Oh yeah, I'd like, yeah, I haven't added any examples specifically that are from the existing examples, like having any adjusted content for that. So that's definitely on the cards if you think that's useful. I spoke to Danielle about the words, and we trimmed it down a lot from a bunch of explanation. So yeah, I think it's more we're trying to balance having too many words and
Yeah, but I think an
causing
example
other issues.
example
Yeah.
tells 1,000 words kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the examples that you provided really provides some in the Confluence provides that context. I think that it would be a shame to lose what you had included in the Confluence. But
Brett, are you
Right.
happy then to raise an issue on Jira to add an enhancement to add to AU Core guidance, a section on this, and we can bring across those examples from the Confluence in the fragments inside the guidance page?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so
So
the action is
to
for
enhance
Brett
all-
to create
there you go.
a new issue and pull forward those comments.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent.
So yeah, so just a note. So I'll add some draft material to the guidance page with to support
Yeah,
that.
I think they're two separate JIRAs. We've addressed
Yeah.
the existing JIRA about removing must support and adding guidance on what to do. And there's another JIRA that's talking about providing an enhanced set of guidance,
Cool. Excellent.
which I think is a great idea. And so
Yeah.
that separate JIRA needs to be raised, and we can merge in the existing content you have.
Yeah, excellent. That sounds good.
All right. Thanks all.
Excellent.
Moving on to the immunization change proposals. These are two decisions that were previously discussed for immunization that we did not have time to vote on. Danielle, if you could talk through these and provide a quick overview.
Yeah, okay, yes, I'll give that a go. So we had a pre-consensus meeting around AU Core immunization, and we discussed a number of aspects of that. And we started at the top, and of the things we ended up talking about, where we wanted to remove must support, and I say we there, and that there seemed to be a general opinion throughout the discussion to remove must support from a number of items in immunization. These were the two items, and we didn't get to vote in them. We didn't get time in the previous consensus meeting because we were addressing, I think, a lot of the gender harmony content. And so we wanted to raise them here in the next consensus meeting to put those up. So out of the AU Core immunization profile, the first item that is still left is immunization.identifier. And we discussed, and if you go to that JIRA issue, Andrew, the explanation in there was that the technical design group had discussed that this didn't seem to be relevant. The need to exchange a real world business identifier that uniquely identifies every immunization administration really didn't seem to be something that was either common or that we actually really had a use case for. And so we wanted to take down that must support for that item. And I think that's about all I need to say on that. Are there any comments or any concerns about that? Does anyone want me to go into any more detail about the immunization.identifier element? Because if not, if there are no objections, we could move to removing must support on that element in the AU core immunization profile.
So just quickly then, are you saying that we don't need to uniquely identify one, or it's optional?
So the dot identifier is a business identifier. It means it's a real world identifier. Things like if it's a request, for example, that's the filler or the placer ID, like lab number. And at the moment, with it being must support on immunization, that's suggesting that there's a need to support real world business identifiers for every single administration or every record of a vaccine in Australia, which really didn't seem to be the case when we had the discussion. There is still obviously the resource ID, which uniquely identifies every single resource, great, but not a real world business ID.
So because the immunization itself, I guess you can consider it, there was the event. I know I went to it.
Yes.
I know that a vaccine was given to me, but to say that this was David Weeb's immunization on the 3rd of September for this reason is what you're trying to say, is there's no real business requirement to officially identify that. They're happy to put many things together to recognize that specific immunization.
Well, to exchange that as the minimum requirements, because that's what AU Core is, as the minimum requirements to exchange immunization information, that wasn't deemed to be the minimum requirements. If we want to look at a history of someone's immunization, you don't need that business identifier of every single immunization in that record.
Yeah. You'll still be able to send it because the element's not been deleted. But the thing is, the receiver is allowed to ignore it. So the receiver doesn't have to ensure that their system has a place to put it and will treat it appropriately. And likewise, even if you've got it internally, if you don't want to share it, there's no obligation upon you to share it.
And some of what you were talking about, David, might actually be the encounter ID, not the immunization identifier.
No, because I must admit, we are trying to count how many times you got jabbed. And whether, you showed up for the encounter, but did you get jabbed at the encounter? We are sort of looking at that a little bit as well.
Well, that will definitely happen because immunization.identify would also count the times you refused or it
Thanks for
didn't
being
happen.
here today. My name is Brad.
So every time you did, there's sorry, I think maybe someone needs to go on mute. Okay. There's a date time that's associated with that. So you'd be able to note that this was unique. This happened here at this location by this person to this person. It's just that we're not exchanging a record ID.
Brett, you also have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not aware of any shared business identifier to recognise a particular instance of an immunisation at all anywhere. So I think it's more, I would just move to let's not have it.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this change request, or will anyone motion to vote on it?
I think Brett moved. I'll second.
I will. Yeah.
Oh, noting there's also a hand up at this point. No? Yes?
Sorry, just motioning. No. All good.
Okay.
All right. Richard or Brett, did either of you motion, to be clear?
Yes, Brett will motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Richard.
All right. The motion to go ahead, Danielle.
I'm going to try and launch the poll, but I might launch the wrong one. I can't see all of them. So if it's the wrong one, I'll close it really shortly. Let me just try for... No, that's the wrong one. Sorry.
It should have the identifier in the title.
I can't see the full thing because the string's too long. It's got cut off. Oops. Okay. Bear with me one more time. I will.
I think the last one was the right one.
Yeah, the last one was the right one. Yeah.
It was, and I've gone and done a silly thing. Oops. Relaunch poll. There's the words. Here it is. Okay. Apologies for that.
Yeah, cool. That's it.
Okay, we've got about 60% of people on the line have voted. Please make sure you vote, even if you're abstaining. That's perfectly acceptable. We're still waiting on 20 people maybe to vote. If you've got that in front of you, please click a button. All right. We've got those votes in now, and I will share those results.
All right, it looks like the motion passes. Thank you, Danielle. Moving on to the second immunization ticket of reviewing must support on status reason. We're going to try and keep this to about 5 minutes to stay on track for the meeting. So if there's not a clear consensus, we can move on. Danielle, take it away.
Similar thing, this is one of the items discussed in the pre-consensus meeting around immunisation, where there were a number of concerns raised that we were including status reason, and that this seemed premature or that a lot of systems didn't support that. So out of that meeting, we've raised the change request to remove must support on immunisation.status reason. And I think that needs to be put to this group to note whether or not they want to include that. For those people who weren't at the pre-consensus meeting, immunisation status is one of the things we use to indicate whether or not an immunisation was given, or if, for example, a patient refused it. And the status reason explains why they refused it. So it could be on, you know, religious grounds or other reasons, and that's what that value comes in. And there was a lot of discussion that this is something that just isn't captured by systems. And so there was no reason in the AU Core R1 to have must support on this element for AU Core immunisation. And that's why we're putting this to vote today, to check that with the technical design group to say, can we remove must support from this? Because this isn't a thing that should form part of the minimum requirements. Any comments or questions about that?
I generally agree. And that is from all the big four.
I hope this isn't out of left field or anything like that, but just because of the terminology you use. So not that I'm suggesting we have to change anything, but immunization, like I'm immunized against something, but then eventually wears off. So aren't we talking about actually a vaccination as opposed to a, no, we're not. Good shake of the head.
Well, yes, although I guess it's vaccine administration, if you will.
Yep.
Like me, I started
or vaccine non-administration in this case. It's a reason to know why a vaccine was not administered.
Philip?
Maybe if I can get off mute. Yeah, I was just going to express support for this particular item. My system does capture or allow for the capture, but I will say from our experience so far, we don't have, you know, at least from the hospital perspective, people are not documenting why they didn't give something. Get that may work a little bit more in the GP because they're coordinating a lot more of that. But I guess my thought process is that not every system needs to know that there was a conscious decision to defer or, you know, other immunity or some of those other kinds of reasons in every case. So the systems that do capture it need it for their processing or for their clinical workflow, happy for them to have it, happy for them to share it. But my thought process there was that not every user of that immunization would even want to know all that information, depending on what they're trying to show or do with it.
All right, thank you, Philip. If there are no other questions or comments, is there a motion to move to vote on this proposal?
I'm happy to motion.
Thank you, Philip. Is there a second?
Yes, happy to.
Thank you. Danielle, if you can wade through the litany of Zoom polls I put together beforehand and see if we can find this one.
Yes, I need to find the option that lets me, bummer, relaunch it. Yes, I can't. I might not actually be able to figure out the way to do that.
Which one is it again? Which number? I'll see if I can do it.
44658.
658. All right, let me see if I can do it as well. If two of us wasting our time trying to do it.
If not, we can move on and circle back.
Well, yeah, we can put hands up instead. We can go the virtual manual option.
All right.
Making it easier.
Okay, we'll do a quick hand vote. Those who are opposed to this change request, please raise your hand if you are opposed. Okay. If anyone is abstaining, please raise your hand. There's still a couple coming in. We'll give that one more moment.
There's currently 11. So it's 11 abstaining.
11 abstaining out of 50. Sorry, I'm included in that abstain. So
yes.
That's 12. And then that's 12 out of 52. So that would leave 40 approving, and the motion will pass. All right. So that is it for the immunization. Moving on now to AU core vitals and the AU CDI vitals and measurements.
Andrew, could I ask a quick question on the immunization front?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have another point where we're going to talk through some of the other must supports? So when you showed up the full immunization profile, it looked like the AIR code was still being required. I'd have a concern on that. Happy for it to be parked, but I just wasn't sure if we had a spot for where we discussed that.
I do not know off the top of my head. I do not think there's an upcoming further plan discussion on immunization before the R1 ballot for comment goes out. But I would say the best forum would be to raise a JIRA ticket or change request for that, because that's what's driving a lot of the conversation. So I don't believe there's any other JIRA requests for immunization currently.
Okay. Thank you.
And Tim's not on the line, and Tim's sort of coordinating some of the immunization feedback coming through the TDG. There are a few other items that have been raised on this, not one in specific about supporting AIR and concerns about whether or not that remains a supported terminology. So that would be, if you've got concerns about that, Philip, that would be great if that came through in a JIRA, so we can bring that in. We can also look to schedule a call around, I guess, the terminology we need to support in immunization.code. It looks like we're actually going to end up needing to have a call, which shouldn't be surprising, I guess, on almost all of the major clinical resources and the terminology that's there, both condition.code, allergy intolerance.code, stuff around medications. Looks like it's something that we really need to take specifically and have discussions about what we support. There isn't one scheduled yet, but if is a higher priority maybe than other items. And I guess the way we know that is people raising concerns in this TDG and also maybe raising issues in JIRA, then we can schedule that in.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Danielle. Jojo, you still have your hand raised. Did you have a question or comment?
Sorry, no, just a lingering hand.
Thanks. All right. Moving on to vitals and measurements. So we're going to talk through AUCDI mappings, then change proposals that came out of the original pre-consensus discussion. So we'll talk about what was discussed at pre-consensus and possible change proposals for that. The AUCDI has 7 vitals and measurements in it. So blood pressure, pulse, body temperature, respiration rate, height, body weight, and waist circumference. Those map to the 7 corresponding profiles, which are profiles on the observation resource. Relatively straightforward. The items in AUCDI are really only what you see on the screen right now. So the rates, the pressures, etc. In the future, the proposed R2 stuff for AUCDI has some additional information around that will play into how we have to look at these resources for R2, but currently these are the only ones in R1. Heather?
Hey, Andrew. Just pointing out that AUCDI has pulse rate, but it's actually not heart rate. It's a different thing.
That is the profile name in AU Core and the proposed mapping. So we can review if that is the correct mapping or if there needs to be an alternate mapping or how that best correlates to that resource.
The intention for pulse is a peripheral rate, not at the heart, and heart rate is a specific thing that's quite different from a clinical point of view, and you often need to be able to compare them so that you need to know the source. So this is it's a bit of an issue from a semantic point of view, but clinically they need to be able to be very clearly differentiated, the source of the rate.
Okay. I will take a note to put in a follow up with you on that and see what the correct change request or change proposal would be for this.
Yeah, I think we need to look at the low-end code and what the core FHIR standard does and the semantics there. I mean, not every FHIR element or FHIR profile has a consistently appropriate language into a clinical space. So it's really the low-end value that declares what kind of observation this is that we really need to check against.
And you can also anticipate that there will be a heart rate at some point if this progresses. So there will be 2 models in AUCDI that need to be clearly differentiated. So at least a strategy about how to manage it. Thanks.
Okay, I will take that as a follow-up to look at that. And this might not be the correct mapping depending on that line code. Roy?
Hey guys, just some feedback around waist circumference. Querying whether this is necessary for R1. It's generally, I mean, I can see height and, like from a clinical perspective, definitely height and weight for BMI, but waist circumference is very rarely used or measured.
Heather, did you want to weigh in on that? Because this one is coming in from the AUCDI R1.
Yeah, it's not something that I've driven for sure, and I'm not going to die on this hill, but it was a replacement for BMI basically, and it's certainly seen as being much more accurate as far as cardiovascular risk and tracking waist circumference rather than tracking BMI. So I think that's the clinical requirement underpins it. That's where it's come from, as I understand it.
Yeah, it's in the RACGP preventative care guidelines as one of the inputs into
so
some of the risk. Yeah,
it's kind of something in transition as far as priorities, but because one of the requirements was around cardiovascular risk assessment. That's why it's been included as one of the key markers. I'm happy to have further input to it, and you can certainly put that into the AUCDI comments, but I think that's the driver for it, Roy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Additionally, we'll touch on it at the end of the meeting of the upcoming meetings. We'll also discuss the scope of R1 and driving that forward. So that will be another opportunity to comment on that. Just as a quick example of what a vital profile looks like in AU Core, the differential. This is the differential view, which includes must supports on encounter performer, the value coding, and an inclusion of an additional SNOMED one. These are all based on the Core FHIR vital profiles for their corresponding elements. And then other key elements such as the subject, the base link set, etc., are also included. Just as a recap of what we discussed, what were the kind of discussion topics at the pre-consensus meeting is we discussed around the code sets. Currently, there are only 2 mandatory values for the code set, a SNOMED code and a link code. The SNOMED code is the additional differential, and those represent the vitals at a broad sense. There might be additional concepts or codings needed for future versions with the AUCDI R2 roadmap, for example, for blood pressure, etc. But that is not a part of AU Core R1. Additionally, we talked around encounter, how that is a differential and required must support on AU Core, same with performer and units. Based on those conversations, I captured the observation performer and the units requirements on change proposals to say remove those must supports to bring to this group to discuss further and gather feedback if this is something that should remain must support, or it is something that we would consider wanting to remove. So the first proposal I entered was to remove must support on observation performer. The vendor support usage, I did not see too many comments on that, but I figured it would be good to discuss. Is this something that people are using? What purpose are people using it for? And then in terms of comparison, it is not a must support element on US Core or IPS or IPA because those fall to the base FHIR spec. So I'm going to open the floor for discussion on, is this something that the group would want to consider, or any thoughts or feedback?
I think it can be deferred. Like, if it's definitely not a scope for R1. From a clinical primary care perspective, we write the observations, and whether like the nurse, a practice nurse can do it, or a GP can do it. Usually if the patient provides their observations, we're inputting into the same fields, and so there's no real differentiation there. The utility is much the same as it stands today. So yeah, I'd support the removal. For R1, obviously we want to make this better, but yeah.
Brett?
Yeah, I just think, yeah, I think it is, can anyone articulate a use case for its direct inclusion, I think would be the question. And it's I think there's a broader provenance question in play, where we kind of want to know where all the information came from that's come from somewhere else. So I think that's probably a bigger question. But yeah, so I would say I would be happy if it went out.
Danielle?
Yeah, and I kind of want to talk to where that came from. So a lot of the focus that I've heard over the years, noting that I've been in the Australian Digital Health Agency and looking at that national level exchange, and also from the clinical design group, is understanding, which is really that provenance about where did this data come from? Is this coming from a device? Is this something that was recorded as part of some sort of location? Is this coming from the patient themselves about all of these different observations? And that seems to make a material difference towards how this information is understood. And so this was included as must support for our group to understand, can we support this? Given that it really did seem to be of priority from a clinician focus to understand where those observations came from. And I see Heather's put her hand up. You might be able to speak to that, Heather.
Just from a personal point of view, provenance is huge, and for things like a body weight or a height or something, blood pressure probably doesn't matter. But when observation is used for other quite specific, quite specialized critical things, I think it's different. So applying a general rule here is really difficult. You know, I can't say yes or no because it depends. And I guess that's where I sit at the moment. Sometimes it's really, really important, and sometimes it really doesn't matter. And because observation is used so broadly, how do we actually apply that consistently? Maybe it has to be done at profile level, in which case removing this at this level is okay, but it really needs to be part of the consideration. Is that what you're wanting, Danielle? Open for? I don't know.
Sort of. So, and someone's raised in the chat. Well, or Kath has raised in the chat, and it's a worthwhile thing to say here that we're talking about provenance, and there's a resource in FHIR called provenance. There's also a resource called audit, and the resource in FHIR called provenance, which is entirely designed to provide you the context of this. But there's also so FHIR denormalizes things, basically, and the things that are deemed clinically relevant usually also have elements in the FHIR resource themselves. So you can have the provenance resource that say this got recorded, who the actor was, and all that kind of thing. But the resource itself will also take what those things are that are deemed of more clinical relevance and put those elements in there. And if you were to have a provenance resource that was capturing that first kind of action, you would expect the data in both of those to match. And there's also obviously every resource has a meta kind of thing, which talks about last updated, but it doesn't have the things about who did this. And so what's in some of the resources, the clinical resources, it's the same in kind of condition, allergy intolerance, observation, is it's calling out some of those things that might also live in provenance but are important to always stay with the clinical resource about who asserted it, who recorded it, that kind of thing is in there. And I guess it is up to us at this point to decide if we think in our one, or I guess in general in our UCore, being able to exchange this information is a must support requirement. Noting that from provenance, and I kind of want to call this out now. I know we've not talked about provenance yet.
We are very time limited, Danielle, so if you can do a quick review so we can move on.
Provenance is usually the last hop. So from a HIE perspective, you won't get the performer out of your provenance. You'll get the last hop from that. You might not. I'll close my discussion there.
Thank you. Brett and Barty, we'll take your thoughts and comments and then move on from this topic.
Cool. Yeah, I was just going to essentially back up what Daniel was saying, but so I think for me the only question is, do we at this point in time have a real driving need to distinguish between a patient supplied entry and a healthcare system supplied entry from a performer or a service? And I think that's probably the only question I would have about dropping it.
Barty?
Yeah, I was just wanting to what Daniel has said, that provenance should really be the last option for these kind of details, because when there is interoperability existing and performer and those kind of information might be relevant, whereas provenance, what I feel is should be more to whatever that specific product might need for themselves, not really for an interoperable solution. And accessing a provenance is not really that simple. It's a bit complicated to process to get the right provenance for any instance. So, and we as Telstra Health are also working on and feeling that the person who last worked on a resource or what they did, that's really kind of missing, and it's needed for every single resource, as rightly said by Daniel. And I know it's not really part of the AU core, but probably in AU base that can be looked at to have that extra field as an extension or whatever that really provides that information about that person who worked on it. Thank you.
Thank you. What I will do is I'll ask for people to continue commenting on this JIRA ticket. There is a link in the presentation. Put your comments in. If it seems that a clear picture is formed, we can move to do a electronic vote or table it till a further meeting. Same with the proposal to remove required bindings for metric units. I asked that people view the JIRA ticket and put their comments on this proposal in there. And based on those comments, we will look at doing a electronic vote or discussing further at a further future meeting. I'm going to hand the floor over to Ruben to discuss sex assigned at birth and gender harmony RSG in AU Core R1. Ruben.
Thanks, Andrew, and hi, everyone. I promise this is not going to be a lengthy discussion, and I thank the coaches for giving me time to discuss it. I guess I should start by saying, for those of you who have now looked at the public review version of AUCDI, there included in there is sex assigned at birth as a data element to be supported, and accordingly, we need to support it in AU Core. Adopting the gender harmony approach to doing so involves representing the sex assigned at birth value using a recorded sex or gender data element, which in FHIR is an extension. And this slide has all the links to doing so, which I'm going to try to not cover in too much depth, given we've got not too much time left in this meeting. If we can go to the next slide, Andrew. So what I'd like to introduce, and if time allows, potentially vote on, is the proposal which Danielle and I have worked through. And I want to recognize Danielle for doing a lot of work in this space. It is a little bit trickier than you'd think, because what we're trying to do is support sex assigned at birth as a must support element using an RSG extension, but at the same time, also allowing additional RSG values to be included. And what's described on this slide is how we've come up with doing that. So the first point is we're seeking to adopt sex assigned at birth as a must support element in AU Core patient. And we will implement support for this by defining a sex assigned at birth profile of the gender harmony individual recorded sex or gender FHIR extension. That profile is going to put must support on the RSG type and fix it to the SNOMED value you see there, which is actually from SNOMED CTIU. I believe work is afoot to get that promoted to the international edition of SNOMED, just by the way. The second thing is to put must support on the actual RSG value, and that will also have an extensible binding to the biological sex NCTS reference set, which is also in SNOMED CTIU. And lastly, we're proposing that we include must support on the acquisition date element in RSG. That's simply an assertion of when the sex assigned at birth value was acquired by whoever captured it. Secondly, we will add a must support slice on patient.extension for RSG, and this is the part that actually makes the profiled extension must support. And finally, in the gender identity and related concepts subsection of the profile, we'll add the following statement, which you can read on the screen. I won't read all of that. So this, what the end result of this will be is that sex assigned at birth will be must support. It's optional, and so should only be included if it's available to the sending or system creating the FHIR resource. And receiving systems need to be able to process it and recognize it if they receive it. I think I might pause there and just throw to Danielle to see if I've left anything out.
No, I don't think so. I think that's good.
Did we have a version of this in the continuous integration build, which we can just briefly show everyone, Danielle?
Yeah, I think I put in 2 extra slides here that show a mock-up of what that would
perfect.
look like. Yeah, there we go. That's
Very
what the
good.
profile
There we
of
are.
the extension looks like. Noting, I just want to call out for the group that we have actually consulted with Graham on what would be the most appropriate way to support and define this, because in FHIR there's many ways to write your rules, but yeah, he's come back with what we thought, which was a profile of the extension to say this is the use and these are the rules around the use that you need to follow.
And I just want to flag, we're looking at the differential there if you're wondering where everything else is. It's probably on the snapshot tab, which isn't on the slide. The next slide, Andrew, if you please. Great. And this is an example of what it's going to look like on the wire, as we like to say. So looking at the top, you've got a individual record sex or gender extension declared, and within that, the value, in this case, it is female. The type, which is the SNOMED code, which we mentioned before for sex at birth, and lastly, the acquisition day. And I think that is the last slide now. Is it, Danielle?
Yeah, it should be. The next one's just how to provide feedback.
Okay. Right. So we should probably get that up, and happy to take questions. And I see Angus has his hand up.
You're still on mute.
You're on
mate.
mute, Angus.
Always. I just wanted to ask where we're going in the future with, if we're having sex assigned at birth, what's happening with the concept of sex for clinical use? What's the long-term view? Like, are we going to have both eventually, or are we going to now say sex assigned at birth is sex for clinical use, or am I confused on both?
No, you're not confused at all. So it's certainly on my to-do list to look at sex parameter for clinical use. But to answer your question, I believe the intent is that we want to take that to the clinical design group in the first instance and get their feedback on something like sex parameter for clinical use. What I can tell you is that there was a significant number of individuals at the clinical design group face-to-face who raised this in the context of e-requesting. So I think that there is an appetite to do something in that space, but I don't think any firm decisions have been made just yet. It'll be interesting to see what the feedback on the AUCDI public review draft is with respect to that. And obviously, if anyone here thinks that that's something which should be flagged there, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah, I just made the last comment because it's just, if we're going to end up with both, it's going to get confusing as to, in a pathology sense, which one to use, but
yeah,
much water to go under the bridge
absolutely.
still.
Indeed, but I also want to add before I throw to Brett that sex assigned at birth is pretty much universally recognized as a very useful thing to have. And so I think it's very appropriate at this stage of where we're at that it be supported. Brett.
Yeah.
I just with sex for clinical use, I think it's very hard to. I don't think it's a general concept. It needs to be put in the context of some interaction. So I think unless you have a use case and you're very explicit about what it means, I think in a profile, I think you need to kind of approach it that way. So yeah. So so I think it's if it's on a request or on a a referral and you want the receiver to have that in mind when they're doing their activity. That I think that's where it kind of fits.
Mhm.
And then so there's no
Yep.
kind of general status because it depends what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's yeah.
Agreed.
I agree, but I see eventually there's going to be like cascading rules, isn't there? Like, so if we get sex for clinical
Maybe.
use and we get sex assigned at birth, you know, what are we doing? And
Yeah.
just that being clear eventually on that.
Yeah, but I think that's more about the case again and about what you think's appropriate and safe to do, right? And it's yeah. So I think it gets down to being quite specific. Yeah. Anyway.
Thanks, Brett. Over to Heath.
Two things. Is there a reason why this isn't being specified at AU base level?
Yes, there is. Must support. It's a complex extension.
Sorry, I'll qualify my question.
Okay.
Defining the extension at AU core.
Yes, we haven't defined an extension. It's a profile only that is being defined. The extension is the international extension. We're not redefining, we're not doing a new extension. We're doing a profile to apply must support and fixing the rules on it.
Yeah, and we will add that. That will be an AU base.
So on the wire, you will have no idea that it is AU core because on the wire, it is the international extension. We're saying that AU core, in order to support sex assigned at birth, applies these conformance rules.
Okay, I'll qualify again. Why are we not doing the profile at AU base?
Because we need must support. We can do it at AU base as well. It seems an expensive effort because we'll need one at AU core. We have to supply must supports on the part of the extension we care about. So part of this proposal, and I'll just qualify that for everyone here and please comment on that. So at least two things, like any observation, really is necessary: a code and a value. That's what type and value do here. There's also another bit, which is acquisition date, which is proposed to be must support here. There are many other parts of the extension that could be must supported. They're not proposed for support in AU core, and we need to reach a position on which bits we do agree on. So we can do a thing in AU base, but that doesn't negate the AU core profile.
Okay, so my second question is, can we separate the must support on patient compared with the profile for sex assigned at birth?
Not between AU base and AU core. AU base is not an implementable standard. It's definitional only. It has no must supports.
I'm meaning in the terms of voting for this proposal. There's two motions.
Sorry, I'm not getting that, Heath.
So I have no problem with the profile on the extension for the concept of sex assigned at birth. I have a concern about assigning must support for this concept on AU core patient. And I would like to be able to vote on the two separate things.
The fact that it's must support here is driven by AU CDI.
And I think that's what you're voting on in the end is the combined thing in AU core. That's what's coming up here. If we could put the proposal in AU base and your vote would be on how should someone exchange sex assigned at birth if a downstream IG or anyone needed to in AU base. But I guess the proposal to the AU core technical design group is that we do must support it in R1 and that we must support it in this fashion. I think it is combined, yes.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that as well. The profile exists purely to add the must supports. I don't actually see how things would be very different if we did this in AU base as well.
It's more about 1 and 2. I would like to vote on 1 and then vote on 2.
1 being?
Sex assigned at birth as must support element in AU core patient.
Yes.
I want to be
now,
able to...
Part 2 is how we do one.
Yeah, which I have no problem with saying this is how we do this, but I have a concern about enforcing it within patient at this time.
We can do that. We can put up a vote that has two parts to it. Noting, of course, if the first part, which is the important part for AU Core, doesn't get up, then the second part is more of a backlog thing.
You must forgive me a bit here because I don't actually see what the difference here is. 2 is really the technical details of how 1 is realized. Or do you have issues with the bullet points within 2?
No, I'm for 2. I'm against 1.
Okay, so if I said to you 1 is there because sex assigned at birth is included in AUCDI, is your argument that it shouldn't be in AUCDI?
No.
Okay, so how do we remain compliant with AUCDI, which is a goal of AU Core, if we don't make this must support?
Because there is 2 different things between AUCDI supporting it in a system versus a system supporting it in their FHIR API.
Maybe Phil's comment will shed some, I don't know, light or move the conversation in a new and interesting direction.
Yep. It'll be a different direction. I don't know that it's any new light. I was writing it in the comments piece. I just wanted to, I guess, thinking about it from an MSIA perspective, so the industry perspective, I just wanted to make sure that there were other use cases where the sex assigned at birth was going to become a common element that was recorded and required to be recorded in, say, the GP and specialists in some of those spaces. I'm seeing evidence through the statutory reporting in Victoria, heard some rumors of Queensland too. I'm sure it'll come through most of the other states. So the hospitals may be forced into this. Great. Like, I think it's the right thing to do. There's international acceptance for some of those things. But before we get to the must support and say that a system like Angus's in the PathRad space must understand it and consider it and some of those kinds of things, I just want to make sure that other source systems will be having similar kinds of moves that aren't just everybody in a goodwill state. And that may be fine, but just knowing how long that may take if it's just only a goodwill.
Which I think does shed light on what Heath was saying. And maybe that's the two-part vote of we agree on what the technical definition is, but it's not an R1 AU Core requirement. And we look at, do we include that in R2? Perhaps that's what we're really talking about.
Yeah, if we needed GP specialists, others that were routinely registering patients to make it available to other systems processing things, that was common, I'm happy to say, yeah, let's must support it right now, because it seems like most of the states are going down that direction, and that'll force the capture somewhere along the way in the hospital pieces. And if we can get the majority, okay, let's make that move. But if there's some key segments that are not going to be capturing that, it's definitely not something that a lot of them have done yet, then I can see that it might be hard for some of those downstream systems to figure out what to do, because it'll take a while to get it adopted to capture it. Yeah, thanks.
So can I respond to that, Phil? The sex currently captured in EHRs like yours and others, what do they regard that as, if not sex assigned at birth?
Well, so originally that was maybe the thought process, but we've redefined it, at least in my system, to be the administrative sex. So it's the sex that we are using for the purposes of this visit or this encounter, because we couldn't reliably know if that was the birth sex or the sex identity. I don't have a great way of describing it for this visit, essentially. So we've made the assumption that that sex is how we should treat the patient for this visit, but that may not match their sex assigned at birth. So that's where we would capture that as a separate field, a consciously separate field. And it may also not match, other recorded documents, insurance, and other sexes that may be needed for Medicare checking or other things, depending on where you are within that potential transition. So we'll have a number of sexes that will capture beyond just admin and sex assigned at birth. But you know, my systems had to deal with that because of a number of other jurisdictional elements and changes around the world. I get that not everybody's in that spot yet, right?
But also, Philip, I think it's important to recognise that systems like the hospital systems are basically relying on a feeder system for that information. So,
yeah,
the PAS system dictates what we collect.
And those PAS, at least in some states, the PASs are going to be forced to change. Victoria is forcing that July 1st, at least as an example, as part of their statutory reporting. So that kind of removes my, I don't know that my clients will pick it up as fast in my head. I'm just kind of wondering, are there other pockets in the Australian healthcare space where that must support might be really a challenge? And if there isn't, great, let's put it in.
What I anticipate is going to happen here is people will regard this field in AUCDI and in AU Core as the sex field to use for sex and different to gender identity. Now, if we don't make this must support, then I'm a little bit concerned as to what people are going to populate and how it's going to be regarded. Yeah, we're drawing a line in the sand to say, we'd like you to support sex assigned at birth. That's the recommendation from the clinical design group. It's the recommendation from RACGP. And, it's got clinical backing behind it. The alternative is a really strange place.
Yeah, I guess my challenge there is that the sex assigned at birth is not necessarily the sex we should be using for rooming and bedding a patient today. And so what you've just said, Ruben, of if everybody says that we're just redefining a sex that's always been there to be sex assigned at birth, and all the system functionality and all of our systems just picks up as it has been today, that could be really potentially dangerous in certain circumstances because it hasn't been disambiguated.
Well, what sort of disambiguation is required if it's understood that this isn't the most reliable sex value?
I would propose at bare minimum we need probably the two, right? I think that's where what we've seen, that we need at least what is my sex for this visit and what is my sex assigned at birth, and there's use cases for both of those pieces of information. That's what I'd advocate for at a bare minimum. There will be more than just those two, but my challenge here is doing this at the technical side. Basically what we're doing is that if we adopt this and everybody is going to be forced or over time will need to support this, and they may be putting on extra work onto their clinicians to fill out these fields. And that's great if we've have some other driver that RACGP and other teams have all gone, yep, we're all agreed, let's go do it. Perfect. But if it's the vendor coming and saying, well, because we have to get FHIR conformance, we need this extra field, so you need to capture it, that's a hard uphill battle for anybody to say that they've gotten value, right? Even though I think this is absolutely critical to be really clear on.
Really quick, we are 10 minutes, 11 minutes over. So recognizing that we have run over time, and this is a discussion that it sounds like we'll need to carry forward, and we can, Ruben, work with you and Michael, who is chairing the next meeting, to see if we can get that discussion on the agenda. I will give Brett and Angus, if you guys have comments to make, an opportunity to do that, and then move on to wrap up. So Brett?
Cool. Yeah, I was just going to back up what Philip was saying. I don't think any system would happily relabel their sex entry at the moment as sex assigned at birth and think that that's okay. So it's yeah, because effectively you've collected an administrative sex, like Phil said, and I think the people entering the data are not collecting sex assigned at birth, and in history, right? So everything that's there doesn't actually represent the concept faithfully. So I think if you want to actually know this, you need to explicitly ask it and record it. So yeah, I think it does lead to saying, yeah, maybe systems do need to change and so forth. And I'd actually take the point that, which is I think Heath's point really, is that if the systems don't actually support this concept now, it's you know, it shouldn't be an R1. You know, I think it's absolutely valid that we should have the idea, but yeah, I'm not sure that there are many. We should actually, I think, take a survey and say who actually collects sex assigned at birth explicitly, yeah, and actually know that, yeah.
Thank you, Brett. Angus.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that but must support's going to make people who capture this provide it to people, diagnostic labs, for instance, and then it's going to mandate that the lab must understand it, isn't it? So it's going to force the receivers that if you can't accept sex assigned at birth, then you can't hook up to this system. And I'm worried that must support's a very hard thing to apply across systems, because you're now saying everyone must support it, no questions asked. You don't have, if you don't have it, you don't have to put it in. But if you put it in, the receivers now have to understand it. Like a lab can't now ignore sex assigned at birth and just use the old RSG one. I'm worried that it's a blunt tool, must support. Like I almost feel like it has to be not must support for some period of time for everyone to adopt it and catch up until you get to a point where we feel like we have 70, 60% adoption, and now we say it's going to be must support by the end of the year. And that's just my comment.
Thank you, Angus. I think, and hearing what kind of you and Philip and Heath have said, one of the things that will probably be helpful is putting together a vendor support page for this to see what the current vendor set of support for this concept is. And Ruben, we can take that offline as a follow-up to get a vendor support page put together on a Confluence. Danielle or Ruben, I think you guys both have a response to Angus, so I'll let ideally let you go and then move on to wrap this up.
Yeah, I know you need to wrap it up, but I do want to comment on that must understand the element, and you do not have to from an AU core perspective. What we're talking about is if you get a resource back with a set of elements in it, which means you fall under being a request app or a client app. Essentially, you've asked for something, you get the information back. You have to be able to process the whole resource and not fall over because you've been given elements that conform to AU core. You do not have to, and there is no expectation that you know exactly what to do with that element beyond doing your usual business. You may be a body weight grapher who you don't actually deal with sex assigned at birth because you're just showing across a child what those body weights are. That's fine. You're able to keep going with your usual business. So I just want to call that out.
While that's true, we can't ignore, like, it's so critical. So it's the sex we're going to provide reference ranges for is so critical to our workflow that if the messages we receive have a sex assigned at birth that is different to the other one, and we're just ignoring that, then I struggle to know how we're legally going to stand up with that
I think
problem.
That means we need specific IGs, which thankfully we're working on, right, with requesting that talk about exactly what we need for that use case. And we need to be careful that AU core does indeed include only the minimum stuff, and we put the downstream and the use case stuff in the use case IGs.
Thank you. Ruben, do you have anything last to add?
I've got a general point and a specific point in response to the discussion here. I take everyone's point here, and it's a point that can be leveled against any form of recorded sex or gender. These things are by definition unreliable. I get that. The second point is strategically, we want to get to a point where we don't actually need this sort of thing in favor of sex parameter for clinical use. So whilst I take your point, and I urge everyone that's made points to add comments to the JIRA tracker item, is to say, if we don't make this must support, then which sex field are we going to make must support? Because I really don't think we want a situation where people can send AU core patient instances without a sex value. And so we'll need to be very clear on how we define that. and also reconcile it with the clinical expectations from the CDG. So please add that to your comments as well. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Ruben. As Ruben said, please go into JIRA and add your thoughts and comments. This was a very spirited discussion and would love to capture all of that in the JIRA comments for this proposal. Ruben, I will follow up with you on creating a vendor support page specifically for this to help capture how everyone is capturing these and what level of support they have for them in their systems currently, and look at doing that. Just to wrap up, again, for all the topics we discussed today, please add your comments to the JIRA tickets, or if you have general questions, the Zulip or GitHub. Coming up, we have 4 TDG meetings over the coming weeks and the Connectathon and face-to-face in Sydney at the end of March. The upcoming topics for tomorrow's session with Danielle will be AU CDI R1 mappings and AU Core R1 scope. So as we approach 8th of March and the release of ballot for comment, the actual scope that is included in AU Core R1 is a very important topic, and Danielle will be walking us through that tomorrow. And then for the 1st of March and 7th of March sessions, please review the following 4 JIRA tickets around allergy intolerance, practitioner organization, and then we'll also look at how we can include Ruben's topic moving forward. And then finally, the Connectathon is the 20th through 22nd of March. The Eventbrite tickets are up and available. I encourage you to go on there and reserve your spots. There are 3 unique events, which I linked out here. The 20th of March firework group plenary session, the 20th of March TDG meeting in person, face-to-face, and then the Connectathon the following 2 days.
I just want to call out here, there's only 60 spots for things like the Connectathon. Please register your ticket as soon as possible. This has come out the day before. So today is the day that the technical design groups have this in advance to the whole public to go register those spots, because it's really important that you guys get to come. So get in there now, register your tickets, please. Because tomorrow everything will be open, and it's again a really limited set due to, you know, workplace health and safety apparently that we have to meet.
Is it worth saying what sort of people we're looking to actually have come to the Connectathon versus the people coming to the working group meeting, for example?
Yeah, sure. So for the Connectathon, especially for AU Core, we're looking for your engineers, developers, architects, integration specialists, testers. We're going to try to be going through actually testing the AU Core specification and looking at confidence around that. Noting though that we're also going to be running breakouts, and some of what we've talked about today and some of what's coming up tomorrow, we might end up scheduling some breakouts to try to get some positions around how we're going to deal with medical history, around how we're going to deal with medication usage. So we really want the people in the line to be coming, and also the people who have who are building out the apps, who are building out their own internal products to be AU Core conformant to come along.
Excellent, thank you. All right, thanks everyone for joining today. Apologies for going a little bit over, and just a reminder, there is a session tomorrow afternoon that Danielle will be leading. So be sure to join online for that. Look forward to seeing you all there, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, mate. Thanks all.
Thanks.
You're on mute if you're trying to say something.